In this video, let's go over the Transform tool in 3D Coat Sculpt workspace. Here in the Adjust section of the tool panel, you can find it toward the bottom. You click on Transform, and you'll see a gizmo that appears. If you don't already have the Tool Options panel docked inside your UI, it'll also pop up here in the viewport. You can also select the Transform tool from the spacebar Quick Access menu. You can find it here in the Adjust section. And let's zoom in a little more closely. You can see that we have these widgets on the outer parts of each stem, and then we have global scale. The little ring in the middle is a way to move in screen space. If you click and drag it while it's highlighted, the outer ring is to rotate in screen space. So I'll undo that. As you can tell, these widgets are color-coded. So what I'm going to do is scale this object down so I can see my Transform gizmo a little bit better. And once again, you have these color-coded widgets that indicate what axis it's going to transform along. You can see the little red Move widget, which will move along the x-axis, or it will scale along the x-axis. And then you have the Rotate widget. If you need to move this gizmo to change the pivot center, then what you can do is hold the Shift key and then move that gizmo into place. So now if I want to rotate along the x-axis, it's going to do so based on this new pivot center. So I'll undo that. Let's say I wanted to rotate this 90 degrees. I know that I need to rotate along the x-axis, but let's choose Rotate X 90 degrees or negative 90 degrees, whichever you prefer. The other way is to left mouse click on the widget and then hit the space bar and enter the value numerically. And that applies to all the widgets. Okay, so let's look at some of the options here in the Tool Options panel. The Move Only Gizmo option is relatively the same thing that we did by holding down the Shift key, except holding the Shift key just saves you from having to go back to the Tool Options panel to check and uncheck as needed. And you have Leave Rotated Axis. The next section is the X, Y, and Z axis positions. You could enter numeric values here. If we wanted to completely zero this out, we could enter all zeros, or maybe we just want to zero it out along the x-axis, 0, y, and z. So let's try 0 here. If we want to zero them all out, we can hit this X button. You can also pick your pivot point, and 3D Coat will quickly change the pivot center based on the location that you picked. You can change how it picks based on this list menu. Pick position only, pick normal and position, pick view direction and position. So let's choose that. I need to choose pick pivot and click. And then scale, you enter it by percentage. So if I want this to be 90% of the scale that it currently is, then I would enter 90. I could do that also with the spacebar option that I showed earlier by clicking in the center. That would do the same thing. Or I could scale again along a specific axis. You can click on the To Main Axis button and have 3D Coat orient the gizmo along the normal average of a given selection or selected object. And also, if we want to quickly move the gizmo to the very center of the object, you can choose Center Mass or Bound Center. You can align to view once again. And Reset Space is if your gizmo, for whatever reason, may be offset. Let's reset the axis and it will reposition it along the world coordinates. Okay. One important option available to you when using the transform tool is the pick by click feature in the toolbar. While the transform tool is active, with that checked, I can just click on another object to quickly select it and make a transform of it. Let's look at one last example here where we have an instance of this glove and we have the logo pointed backwards because when it created a mirror across the z-axis, you can see that the logo is flipped the wrong way. So we definitely want to change that orientation. The quickest way of going about doing that, again, is to auto pick. And if the gizmo is not aligned appropriately, the first thing you may want to choose is center mass or bound center. And you can choose main axis. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that 3D Coat will memorize the last transform you made for every single object. And that's a very powerful feature because if you are working on an object like the mannequin from the splash screen, then it already has stored locations for the gizmo at the joints. So you don't have to reposition the gizmo every time you want to move a limb or a part of a limb. If you save the file, 3D Coat's going to save that last location as well. So that, again, that's very important because you may come back months later or even years later to an old project and you can resume right where you left off. Now let's go ahead and rotate this. I need to rotate along the y-axis. So I'm going to click on that widget and hold and hit space bar. Let's try 180. Shazam. It's just that easy. Okay, now may make a slight adjustment to realign it just a bit better. But there we go. So that's the transform tool in 3D Coat's Sculpt workspace. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.